Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts. I'm Calen Carpenter. With me is my partner, co-host, and father, Brandon. Before we get started, for those on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Facebook, like, comment, share. Find us on Instagram at hashknife.ranch.mt, all lowercase, and on all platforms. Spread the word to your friends. To the opening notes. All right. So this week it's going to be spring cleaning at the ranch. That's the topic. The ranch has had essentially a bad reputation for keeping things unnecessarily, and items
Hey,
tend to mount up. What?
Go ahead.
Okay. I was like,
Continue.
items tend to mount up, such as tires and scrap metal from the past. Unfortunately, most ranches and farms do appear this way. We were/are one of those. So we have slowly worked over the last 10 to 15 years to remove some of those classic eyesores. Some examples are old farm equipment that's broken down and unable to be revived, torn down fences and snow fences, old barns, like homestead era barns, old corrals, and the list can't continue. Now, side note, old barns and stuff, it is part of our heritage. It's very much part of our history, but sometimes it becomes a safety hazard and it needs to go. So we normally collect items all year long and then sometimes every other year. And then we get rid of them all in one single haul, like Dad actually did today. This is more efficient. It helps us to slowly clean up a century's worth of garbage that has been built up. And so with that, Dad and Braden have been busy cleaning up everywhere and getting rid of old stuff that frankly just needs to be gone. So recently they've gotten rid of a bunch of old wooden boards and posts that they burned with the supervision of Braden, who is a wildlands firefighter. And then they've just taken away a bunch of old tires today that ended up saving the ranch about $450 in the way that they did it. And then, of course, we just continue to pick up things and remove them one by one, time after time. And with that, I'll hand it to Dad.
Well, I take issue with keeping things unnecessarily because you never know when you're going to need something.
No, and I think what I meant by that is the tires, for example,
Right.
not necessarily your decision for those being there, but somebody
Right.
else had them there, and so we pay the consequences for it. And
Yeah.
it's generational, and it's also outside family members that have kind of used it as a dumping ground at times.
That's
And that's
correct.
just it's the repercussions of it because hey, you've got the space for it. I'm gonna leave this thing here. Okay, cool. That thing never ends up getting picked up. So we become we become the garbage man over a course of 10 years or so, and that's kind of what happened with all the tires and stuff.
Yeah, that's
But
that, and you're correct. There's some of those tires and what they were. I mean, you can repurpose things, and I'm all about reusing something or
yeah,
giving it a different reason to live, which will benefit you. I mean, there's
well,
all kinds of
recycling,
reasons.
like we've
Yeah, it's
used
just
tires before. We've cut them to chunks and used them as little
yeah,
grain feeders for the horses.
absolutely. You know, the ones that are the old bias plies, the ones that aren't steel belted because then
Yeah.
they don't poke anything, but just the old nylon bias ply tires are fantastic for that. But anyway, uh, yeah, just amassing all of those, and over the last year or so, we've been putting them in a pile or finding a spot to put them when we picked them up, and we're picking them up in all corners of the area because they're used for old feeders, things like that as well. So not just for horse feeders, but I mean for cow feeders. So all told, we have a 24-foot stock trailer that was chucked completely full
I'll throw
of
some pictures
tires.
up.
And oh, you got okay, yeah. Uh, one of the things that's interesting, it kind of takes you back to the Wayback Machine when you're throwing these tires in there, and here's an old tire that's a tire tread type that they don't even make anymore, and they were a fantastic tire. Remember, everybody had them. Everybody in the country had the Central Exchange Co-op or Cenex. It was all called Co-op then. Uh, Country Squire tires. They were an 8 or 10 ply tire, and they had a great tread design. I mean, they were a mud and snow, and everybody in the country had these stupid tires. And so you couldn't tell who anybody was by their tire tracks back then, unless there was something distinguishing about them. But old. There's some old farm equipment that we haven't had for years and years and years that my great grandpa had. So That's all picked up, gone. Disposal fee on that stuff. If you were to take it to someplace like a tire store and say, "Hey, I want a new set of tires," and they take your tires and they charge you to take your old tires. Some of these tires we can recycle, so we do. So I got a stack of, there's about 8 or 10 tires that are really decent tires that you can use in a pinch. Those are always going to be there for trailers, things like that. But if you were to let the uh, tire store take those, it's about minimum $3 a piece. I don't know what it is today, but that's what it has been. So we got about 150 tires disposed of for nothing, just the cost of some fuel to take them to dump them off. And so, $450 is that's a chunk of change. So, and what it did is it benefited a guy who has believe it or not, a paintball arena, a bunch of acreage that he is building paintball, all kinds of different, hide behinds and obstacles and things like that. And I stopped in there one day, so I had a bunch of tires, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing with these tires? Would you like some more?" And he's like, "You got more?" Absolutely. And so I said, "Well, I'll bring you some." So we loaded that trailer up, and it's been almost, God, 6 months since I talked to him. It was last summer sometime. And we pulled in there today. I didn't see anybody around, but he found us because we were just starting to unload. And he goes, "Oh, man, I've been waiting for you. I didn't know if you're ever going to bring me these tires or not." So, it's a good thing when something that is absolutely useless to us and an eyesore is something that somebody else needs. So that was kind of good to do that and get rid of it. But yeah, it's picking stuff up.
But
As
I
you
mean, that's the
mentioned,
thing is like the eyesore. You can go through Wyoming, Montana, the Dakotas, and you'll go along the interstate and you'll just see it just doesn't, it's not tidy. Things are just thrown to the side. It looks like, oh, there's a beat up pickup that just was left to rot and die where it fell apart,
or 16
or
of them.
16 of them. And then, oh, hey, that swather's broken. So what did they do? They took parts and they cannibalized it to try and feed the other one, which now
Right.
it's broken. So now you got 2 or 3 of those things lined up, and
That are
it
obsolete
becomes,
that you can't get parts for anymore. They're
yeah,
not worth it. Yeah.
and it becomes a scrapyard in itself. And it's something that I hate.
Yeah.
To an extent, I understand why it's like that, but it's so painful to see, because it's like you could be using that for a hay yard, or you could be it just looks bad. And it could be used for something purposeful and
Yeah.
helpful.
No, that has always driven me crazy. I'm kind of a neat freak that way. And it shows because I want things put away. I want them put away in a specific way, tidy, clean. And so, we've, like you said, we've knocked down some old buildings or picked up from old buildings that were actually old homesteads. And those homesteaders, you know, they left and they left whatever they had there that they didn't want to take with them. But that stuff gets scattered. It's just over
Yep.
years and decades. It's a bigger and bigger area of glass and metal and wood and you name it, wire. And so it's not good for livestock. It's not good to have around. It looks like just a horrible eyesore. So, those are the times I think you've seen kids that are within like the FFA. They will have a slave auction. And so you can buy a pair of guys or a pair of girls or whatever for, you just bid on them for a day's work. And you're going to pay more than what it's worth, but it's part of the whole thing of
It's a
supporting the
fundraiser.
organization. Yeah. And then having these kids work for it, which, you know what? It's a good thing that when people have to work for or volunteer, do some service work for their organization like that. And I've hired a couple of kids, and their biggest thrill, even though it was just a pain for me to do, is okay. Take them over to where this old homestead was, and I said, "You see all this stuff laying on the ground? Throw it in the pickup, bring it over, and we'll dump it in a pile. I'll show you where I've got a pile of scrap and then a pile of wood, and we'd segregate it." And it was their biggest thrill because they got to drive a pickup and because they didn't have a driver's license yet,
Yep.
and so they were actually, they're good help. They do things like that. So most of that stuff we've kind of got picked up, but there's still some things here and there that just in the normal course of doing things, you build something, fabricate something out of some steel, and you've always got scrap steel left over. You got pieces and parts. And I think last fall I took a flatbed trailer load in. There was another another organization, I think it was for the school, like the student council. They had like a scrap drive where they were asking people to bring their scrap in, sell it, and donate the money to the schools. Like, you know what? That's a good cause. Why not? So I spent a couple of days gathering some of that stuff together and throwing it on a flatbed. And God, I think they got almost like $160, $170 in scrap from just, from that one haul from what we did, which was, that stuff builds up. And, I've got piles of stuff that's like, that's not scrap that's going to town. That can be usable, but
Yeah,
this stuff
it's
over here, there's
usable.
some things that, we
I
don't
was
use
gonna
it.
say there's some stuff that like we find, one by one square tubing or something like
Oh yeah.
that, or some really good solid rolled steel. I'm like,
Yep.
ooh, we might be able to use that for something, and we do. You end
Even,
up finding it as long as it's a good chunk, like not just like a couple inches, but something that's a couple feet or several feet, and then you
Portland,
can,
but there's also some stuff that it's nice and straight and it's in good shape. I'm going to keep it because you
yeah,
never know when you need a 2-inch chunk of little rolled
yeah,
steel or tubing, like you say, you're fabricating something. And I did that here just not too long ago. I fabricated a latch for a gate, and it was mostly out of scrapped type stuff we've had laying here. So didn't cost a dime, but super strong. Um, Wire's a big one. Wire, I hate going out across a pasture somewhere and then there's a roll of wire. And we got some lease property. It's not, we don't own it obviously, but we lease it. And there is wire all over it in that place. And I go by it and I'll pick it up, or you'll see old cans or old oil cans. I mean, there's a lid I picked up for a grease type, like a 5-gallon bucket, all metal, that was made in Indiana. And it's like, the last time something was made outside of the Gulf Coast and the lubricants was a long time ago. So you're always finding stuff like that. And it drives me crazy. You could drive by it, but I can't help myself. I got to stop, pick it up, throw it in the pickup. That stuff all builds up, it's just junk, just garbage. So somebody
well, and
takes a fence out.
that's why I'm trying to do hauls like every, once a year, every
Yeah,
other year, because like you said, it does build up, and it's not worth it's one of those things where it's not worth your time to go every time, every couple months. You wouldn't get much money out of it, and the amount of work you put into putting it all into the flatbed or something like that, it's just worth it to let it get into a big pile and
right.
then throw it all into one big trailer or one big I don't know, flatbed trailer, or in the I don't think we've ever done anything less than a flatbed trailer to do that,
No,
but
no. And it's amazing how well, and those trips are becoming fewer and fewer um,
thankfully.
in frequency. Because we're getting stuff picked up, getting it cleaned up, getting it tidied up.
Diligence.
Yeah, and it's and it isn't like we haven't got anything else to do. I mean, you're doing everything else in the meantime, but you see that scrap pile get big, and you go, okay, you know what? Or something happens, and you've got a bunch of barrels or something like that that are like, yeah, these aren't any good anymore. But okay, now you've got 4 of them plus this plus that. Hey, I'm going to take a trip to town. So you're right. Every other year or so now, every third year, uh, a single trip. It's discarded off to the side where it's halfway neatly piled, as you can do that, so that it can be taken care of. But at least it's not scattered all over the ranch to the far corners. Um,
Well,
Posts are a big deal when we're doing fencing, because then
yeah.
you've got either steel posts or steel and wood, and then you've got all this wire that the wire is old and brittle and it's not any good anymore for anything else. So uh, it doesn't take long to build a pile when you're redoing a bunch of say a mile of fence. That is a lot of posts, which then we put into a burn pile. And when that pile gets up there, that's usually a yearly thing. This time of year, springtime, it's high humidity. Things are wet. You couldn't hardly burn things if you had to. And that pile's up there about 8 foot tall and probably 15 foot across. You're piling it up there all year long, and then your brother takes some magic elixir that he makes, and a little splash of gasoline and a bunch of diesel fuel, and soaks it up, and it makes short order of it. So we just did that I think a week ago. Burned a couple piles, and we had some firewood here that we gave away to somebody who was kind of in need. So they took the good stuff but left all of the junk. So we had to go back and pick all that up and scrape it into a pile as well. But if you don't, again, you got another another pile of stuff. So, mile of fence, you have posts, and then you got the rolls of wire, which add up in a hurry. So it's kind of a extravagant cost to rebuild a fence, but then you've got junk left over that you're that's all you got to show for it, plus a shiny new fence. So it's what you do.
Well, and I guess I should also ask out of curiosity. You said you got about $450 saved for the tires. Are you
Yeah,
going to
just
use
not
that for?
spent.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I kind of consider it saved. Are you going to you have anything in mind for that money to try and put towards, I guess, reinvestment into, like, I don't know, wire for fencing or something like that?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, every dollar you don't spend can go wherever it needs to be when it has to be
Right.
done, So, I mean, that $450 can save on a $35,000 feed, purchases this summer for hay or, mineral or, we gotta get some vaccine for uh, calves when we brand. I mean, there's all of those things that you've got to do. So it isn't necessarily budgeted like that where, okay, we save this money, so we put it into this. Not that we haven't done that. We have, where we're like, okay, we got a couple $100 here for this. Let's buy some, a gate or
Right.
something, that we
Like a
need.
really
So
good
yeah,
heavy duty gate.
yeah. But I don't have anything specifically earmarked for that money that we're saving on that. I mean, it's just got to go where it needs to go. It might have to go for my beer budget. I don't know. That might be a good place for it too.
My beer budget is what you mean.
Yeah, your beer budget. Yeah, that's a big budget.
Yeah. Anyway, the the other thing is like old buildings. So I think what I kind of remember is you could consider it one of the first things that we started cleaning stuff up, and this started with grandpa, was getting rid of the old barn. I mean, it was
Yeah.
a really tiny homestead barn.
Yep.
And what they did was they essentially got the volunteer fire department and they said, "Hey, we got to get rid of a building. We need it gone. We would like you guys to either supervise or take care of it." And they said, "Oh, this is a great training opportunity for us.
Right.
We'll do it." And then what they did was they started it on fire and then they had to put it out. And then they started it on fire and they had to put it out. So they just did that until they finally had to just burn it. But
Right.
there's ways. It's painful because you see your history and your heritage that was from the early 1900s erected out of the middle of nowhere, and the hard work that went into it. But then at the same time, there's safety concerns for not only people but also animals. And it's just
Yeah.
it's time. You got to modernize at some point. So they used it as a good opportunity to try and help the local fire department so that maybe they can help put other stuff out in the future.
Yeah, no, and that was I mean, that's just something that was a good thing to do. But you're right. You see that burn up. I mean, I used to play in that barn for hours and
Yeah.
hours and hours, day after day, and when I was too little to really be out on my own, and I'm just imagining things and just having a good time. And I get a little older and got a horse, so I'm using that barn to saddle my horse. But it was in tough shape when I was a little kid, and it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't in good shape. But it was still safe enough. But then when you guys were little, by the time you guys came along, 30 years later, it was really not that safe to be in. So you can't just stand there and look at it and go, okay, it has value because I can look at it. It
Right.
serviced everybody generations for you know a lot of different reasons, a lot of good use out of it. And you take some pictures of it, you have those memories, and yeah, you provide an opportunity for somebody to train, or if somebody would have wanted the wood for whatever reason, to reclaim, but it was such tough shape it wouldn't have been even any good for that. So actually, a fire department training prop is probably the absolute best use it could have provided for it.
Yeah. I was thinking mom did save some wood, which are on a bunch of our portraits, that she was able to get when grandpa died. But where did that wood come from? I'm trying to remember.
That was that wooden fence that was kind of it was just a wind stop
That's right.
for animals. That was on kind of the west side of the yard and kind of south and west of the barn. And it was just there were 1x8s, some 1x10s. and just actually they weren't even ones. They were, yeah, you call them a rough cut one, but that was, holy cow, probably 100-foot long fence. And we did save a lot of that because there were some good pieces of it. And yeah, your mom has saved that and made had picture frames made out of it, which was really a great use for that because it's
Yeah.
there's part of the ranch fencing right there. So, and there's things like that that are kind of neat to do, and giving them to some people for the same reason.
Yeah. So that's kind of all I had from the opening notes, but something I just thought of is in terms of burning the wood, because like what are you gonna do with the wood? You're not gonna There's nothing you can do with it other than maybe reclaim a little bit, which even then most of that's gonna get thrown away. Like for example, the stuff that mom reclaimed that we're talking about, uh I mean, she still got a stack of it somewhere, I know, but
Yeah,
it's taken care of in a very special spot and there's not a lot of it.
it's under a roof. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But then
bundled.
the other thing too is what's the process for getting rid of it? Because if we can't just keep all of it for sentimental reasons like picture frames and portraits and stuff like that, you got to get rid of it, and it's not really worth it to take it to the dump. So we burn it. Therefore, we always have a giant pile somewhere, and then we burn it at its designated time. So like, what's the process behind burning it? When do we determine when to burn it and stuff like that?
Well, that's actually a good question because most people don't realize that you should have a burn permit. You should allow, get and it's a free permit in this county where the ranch is at. Some counties charge for it, but um, you just apply for it. Tell them what the area is that you're going to be burning. They give you a permit with all of the ordinances and laws of the state, and it's basically a acknowledgement that you're responsible for this. If something gets out of hand, you have a problem, and you're going to pay for any damages to anybody else's property or any use by outside agencies that have to spend a bunch of money and put a fire out. I mean, you're liable for that sort of stuff. So you're pretty careful about it. And most of the time, the fire chief of your county or your county commissioners, and it's usually a designated individual, has the responsibility to either allow you to burn or not through a burn ban. And if the weather is too dry or we have winds, I mean, you got to be a moron to burn in those conditions. But sometimes
People do it.
things happen, and yeah, there's some morons, but uh, sometimes things happen where I know there was one huge fire that was started. Somebody was welding, and sparks got on grass, and the next thing you know, it took off across their yard, and it burned thousands of acres, tens of thousands of acres, and so they're liable for that. But what this permit system is it if it's used properly, I call into the local sheriff's office and say, hey, I got this burn permit. We're going to be burning. And they'll check, say, I don't know if we got a burn permit or a burn order on. You may not be able to. And I said, well, this is where it's at. We've burned here before earlier in the spring. This is the second time we burned, actually. I said, we've got this. Got a wildlands firefighter here. That's what he does for a living. And I've got water on hand that's on a mobile vehicle. And she goes, oh, I'll check anyway, but yeah, you guys are probably pretty good. So I wait on hold, and they're doing their due diligence. And I mean, they want to make sure that they know where you're at, what time you're starting, when you hope to be done, what kind of stuff you're burning, because they need to have an idea of the type of fire that they might be dealing with. And then she come back online. She goes, yeah, I can't get a hold of much. She says, but I don't know if there's a burn ban for sure or not, but you guys know what you're doing. Go ahead. So, but the point is, that way, all I have to do is if this thing gets out of hand, then I call them and I say, hey, we're burning and this fire is taking off on us. They know exactly where to go. They're already pre-prepped. They don't have to ask any questions because, on things like that, sometimes those early responses on a fire can make all the difference. And of course, we had your mom on the four-wheeler with a 25-gallon tank and a sprayer, and she was putting stuff out we didn't really want put out yet, but it
Oh, of
was your
course.
mom. She just,
Braden's getting
oh, that
upset.
fires! I gotta burn! I gotta get that! We can't let that burn! Oh yeah, you can. It's okay. Just let no. And it's really hard for her. It's funny, And Braden is much more comfortable burning stuff that I'm not, because he's so used to it. I mean, he knows those, it has that comfort level. With me, I'm like, I don't know, I can feel a wind against my cheek. Of course, we had a home burn when I was a little boy, two of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And so fire is something I'm a pretty darn appreciative of, but I'm also very leery of, and got a, maybe a little, I guess you might be calling it uh, post-traumatic stress over it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing too, is like the reason why we tend to do it in the either the early winter or in the springtime is because of the moisture too.
Yeah.
Because if something does get out of hand or an ember flies somewhere and it starts to spark, it's probably going to get into either snow or light snow or really moisture grass, so that it's not going to necessarily take off and we can catch it and it'll just smoke and sizzle, really.
Well, or at least it'll creep very slowly if it's green grass. If it's a big fire, I
Yeah.
mean, it'll dry that grass out ahead of it, even if it's green, dry it out
Right.
and burn. But and that's one of the things we did too. Is Braden, picked a spot that was upwind of where we would be burning. So if it was not favorable conditions, it would just burn into an area that's already burned, burn into the black. And he did it. The first fire we did here this spring, he did a little test spot. He could hardly get the grass to go. I mean, it was dried grass, but it was so humid out and we still had some snow on the ground that you could hardly get that thing to burn with a torch. And he's like, "Yeah, I think we're good." I'm like, "Yeah, no doubt. I'm good with this one." But the one we did the other day, I mean, it's drying out a little bit more, but there's not a lot of vegetation on the ground either because the green grass really hasn't started. So we did what we needed to do and be ready. And of course, your mom with a giant squirt gun is it's always Johnny on the spot. She's pretty cute to watch her do that.
So going along the lines of the spring cleaning, what else have you guys been doing this year to kind of like prepare for either summertime or just get rid of things that have collected over the winter and stuff like that?
Well, that's a continual thing, and things do get scattered because when you're in a hurry, say shipping time, and you're having to do a bunch of corral rebuilding or repairs, and all of a sudden you're like, oh man, we're on a time crunch here,
Right.
and so you don't put things away like you should, or and you kind of, okay, I'll stack it here and then I'll get back to it, and then the snow covers it, and then you're like, oh god, I got to do that, I forgot about that, I'll get to that. And so I'm also bad about um, well, I replaced axles on a stock trailer, the one we hauled these tires in, and it was worth, the shell of the trailer is great, but it had some bad axle issues. So I pulled those axles off, built new or bought new ones, and then I welded the spindles on and put them in place and did everything we needed to do, or not the spindles with the shackles. And so I've got these axles now from the old trailer in the scrap pile, but you know what? That's good, solid tempered steel, and it's thick. And it's like you never know when you're going to use some of that. So you still have those kinds of piles too, and segregated stuff. Yeah, it can get away from you too. So you're picking those kinds of things up and putting them in place. Um, I got this hay corral, and we got netting in there, and the netting comes off,
Yeah.
and it gets tore or it gets frozen down in the wintertime. So you got pieces of netting, and I just abhor anything that the wind will pick up and move. And so I find that in a pasture or hanging on a fence or rolling through the yard. I'm constantly picking that stuff up, and in the hay yard, it's laying there, and it gets mushed down into the mud when it starts to melt, or it's been frozen down, and you're picking stuff like that up all the time. And I've seen people's places that are just there's trash. I mean, there's just paper or
Sacks, like
somebody's
old grain
sacks.
sacks just thrown everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, or good old Walmart sacks that are all over the
Yeah.
greater
What
USA.
well, now that makes me think of one of the things that used to be all over the place at the ranch was twine.
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
There was twine everywhere, and we couldn't figure out why. We're like, Grandpa, why is there so much twine? And I
He
think
would
you were the
walk
one that
right
asked him,
by.
right?
Yeah, I would for years. I'd be like, we'd be going along, and I'm seeing a piece of twine laying on the ground, and it's red twine. It was not the old sisal twine that was kind of brownish color, or basically made out of out of hemp.
It was like the red orange, like, is it like
This is poly stuff. Yeah.
okay, it's poly. I was gonna say, is it like fiberglass type? But
Yeah,
yeah,
no, it's plastic. It's poly type plastic. And that's what we've been using for years now because it's so much better. It doesn't rot, because there's
right.
times you'd pick up a bale on a lower tier on a stack when you're feeding it and you pull the strings and all of a sudden now you got a busted bale because it's, rodents have gotten to it. They will eat it. And I mean, it's just a mess or it'll rot enough on an older stack. So everybody's gone to this poly stuff or in the big rounds, same type of poly or netting. Well, we were at that time using small square bales with red twine. We had red twine that we had in our baler. And I would find twine laying all over the place. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'd pick it up and I'd give your grandpa a kind of dirty look. I'm like, God, are you kidding me? And we were walking, this has gone on for years,
I mean, it
and I
would be
just never
stuck in
said
like the
anything.
newer piles, and you'd be going through the corrals, and
Yeah.
you would like trip over it. If
Right.
you didn't see it, you might trip over it. Then
Right.
you'd see like the tag end of it like flopping up
Right.
there, and you grab it and you'd rip it, and then go like 10 feet because it was lasting forever. Yeah.
Or in the grass,
Yeah.
And one day I don't know, I kind of blew up at him and because I didn't say it because it was dad, and it's his place. He was running the place. It was, that's his deal. I'm just here kind of helping. And he almost stepped on a piece of twine that was laying right there in the grass. And I said, why did you pick this up? Because he was kind of a neat freak about that too. And that's where I got that, I think, is always keeping things picked up and in its place, except for twine. And I picked this up and I said, are you kidding me? You can't even pick this up. And he goes, I didn't see it. Like, how do you mean you didn't see it? It was right here. And he goes, well, it looks like grass. Well, duh, he's colorblind.
Yeah.
So we
Red,
had
green.
red, green. We had red twine laying in green grass. And then I felt bad. He changed twine type and got yellow. And you know
Yep.
what? You will not find a yellow piece of twine on the ground. Haven't ever found yellow twine on the ground. He could see it.
I was gonna say it made it harder for the rest of us, but he was the one mostly dealing with it, so he picked it up.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh my God, all these years I've been mad at him, for not picking up twine, something stupid like that, and then not even thinking that he couldn't see it because he was really, really had really bad color blindness and could not see the difference between red and green. And it could be obvious to us, but he couldn't see it.
Right. Yeah.
So that was kind of funny, but yeah. Oh God, what else kind of stuff? We got a little bit of frontage road against the highway, and that drives me nuts.
Oh, the burrow pit.
Yes, and you got people that are just beer cans, pop cans, boxes, bottles. I mean, wine, you name it. It just looks like trash, and they'll go up the road. West wind is prevailing from there, and we're on the east side of the highway, and stuff will be up there, and it just grates on me because I'm picking that stuff up. And I don't do it every day, believe me, but I'll go for a while and there'll be enough stuff. I'm like, all right, I got to go pick all this crap up because nobody else is going to. You ask anybody that traveled that road, no, nothing flies out of my outfit.
Wasn't my beer bottle that I threw out the window?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. So, I mean, there's always that, and then we've got a piece of county road that the same thing that is well traveled. It goes through one of our pastures for a mile, and beer cans and beer bottles, you see them alongside the road. I was like, I got cattle, I got horses out here, but people they seem to not care. And that's irritating. But what are you gonna do about it? You just pick it up and keep going. It's something you always fight with.
And I would say something that it kind of sounds like it's like we're just kind of constantly picking stuff up, but at the same time, it's like, oh hey, this time of year is the year to do it because you're calving right now. So you've kind of got time, but you don't because you're going out constantly and checking the cows, but there's nothing else really going on because you're focused on the cows. So when you're done, you kind of come in and you do maybe small projects, but this is your time to these are the small projects, the ankle biters and so to speak. And so I guess there's other stuff too, like tack, like taking care of tack and stuff like that. Like, is this the time that we normally like trying to oil stuff down or no? I know the answer, but I'm just asking for maybe somebody who might be.
Try to do that in the wintertime, but we're so busy. I have so much tack that it's like, okay, you see a piece of equipment and you go, all right, on a slow day, I'm going to do this. And so you'll take an hour and oil something up, or you'll grab a bunch of them and do it. It's always easier to do it the old Henry Ford method, you got a bunch of things to do, so do it all at once. And so yeah, there's that, and it isn't really the slow time right now because I'm calving. That's why I keep looking out. I've got heifers over here and I've got cows over here, and I'm in the house and I can see, both directions. I can see a cow. She's moving off to the east right now, and I think she's probably going to calve. But so you're distracted. But I'm also training a couple of horses, so I incorporate that work into checking these cows. We're still feeding, so I got to get, feed up, get ready, and get them fed up here in a little bit. But of course, we changed the regime on that too. I'm not feeding in the morning right now. I'm feeding in the evening so that those cows will tend to calve during the day and not at night. You can kind of about 85% success in changing the calving time based on when you feed them. So, there's always that. There's staging hay, getting that ready to go, cleaning some corrals. I was doing a little bit of that. Yeah, and you're right. It's all that ankle biter stuff that you want to get to, but it's a kind of a pain in the butt to do it. So you take this time during calving to knock out a lot of these small, stupid little tasks that, fixing some doors, repairing gates, putting a latch on gates, all of those kinds of things that you're right here anyway, and you really can't leave. I took these tires down here and dropped them off and went to Billings, which is about 80 miles away. But I this morning, and it was all dependent on how things were going to go today. And this morning, we've had them loaded in this trailer now for about a week, but I haven't been able to get away. And I got to get the right times. And I'm looking at it, and we're going to get some rain. Well, I don't want to be out there in that guy's pasture when it's raining, because that's some pretty soggy ground and it's real alkaline type. And so you can just sink out of sight in a hurry. But my priority are these cows. And so I checked everybody this morning, and I had no calves overnight. Nobody looked like they were. There's the two that calved just a little bit ago when I got back were older cows. They were, I knew they were close. I figured they might go any day or maybe today when I looked at them at about 6:30 this morning. But as soon as I was done, and I had the Montana Socials video stuff that I worked with them from 9 till about 10:30. And as soon as 10:30 hit, I checked these cows really quick one more time. Everybody looked good. I jumped in the outfit and I ripped down the highway and met your mom and your brother, and they helped me unload. And then we went to town and dropped his pickup off to get a set of tires on it. And all of the time you're thinking, okay, how long's it been? How long's it been? Which one? Because if you don't have a bunch of heifers calving, all you need to do is leave the house for 20 minutes or leave the ranch for 20 minutes, and they'll all calve. And that's
right.
It's kind of, part of me was kind of like, I hope that happens, but you want to get back. So I was only gone about 5 hours, 4 hours total. But a lot can happen in that time when you're gone. So you stick around close and you get some of those things done. But this is, getting away a little bit further than normal, but I need to have that trailer able to be used when I need it too. So you're holding your breath that nothing bad happens, and you can't move anybody if you had to, because you got a whole trailer full of all these tires. It took us, an hour and a half to load up. But yeah, a lot of small things, fencing, some water trough issues. Just all of that little stuff that you say, oh, I'm going to get to that one of these days. And it's a half an hour job, replacing the back rubs for these cows coming into the corrals. I did that, restrung those and with some better ropes, newer rope when some of them had busted, and recharged them. That's a kind of a pain in the butt deal. It took about 3 hours to do all of them, but it's got to be done. So some of those things I'll wait and do too at this time of year, so that it keeps me busy and keeps me out of the bar.
Yeah, another thing was we've had, I think, a in the shoot episode on this about you can't really leave, but you brought up you can't leave during calving season because you don't know what's going to happen. Like the fact that vacations are kind of rare in the sense that you just can't go anywhere because animals need to be fed, they need to be watered. People, if people think about their dogs and how they have to board them and stuff like that before they leave, multiply that across a couple species, and and tenfold it maybe a time or two, and then
or 100-fold if you got, yeah, that's right.
yeah, and that's what there's there's kind of your planning process, but then more so during calving season, because okay, now imagine you got all these dogs, and they're about to have puppies, they're about to whelp and stuff like that. So what's the process behind that is, you gotta stay there and watch them. So it's something that I think maybe taken a little bit of for granted, because there's definitely been times growing up where grandpa and grandma called on an Easter, like just a couple days ago, the hey, we're not gonna be able to make it. Oh, what's going on? Well, we got cow looks like she's about to have a calf, or maybe this one might be breech, or
Looks like it's
I may have
backwards.
to
Yeah,
pull.
right.
I may have to hold it onto this calf. It's because there was the springtime on that one. I remember the calf was really, really cold because it was a bad snowstorm, and grandpa's like, we're not coming. It's not happening. This
Yeah.
I got to make sure this calf's gonna live.
Well, and you understand that growing up in that, but some people may be offended that you're not going to make it, and
Right.
but I tell people that. I said, and they'll say, "Hey, can you do this?" And I say, "You know what? I'm calving right then. I really
Can't make
can't.
can't
I can't
guarantee
do it."
anything.
Yeah, or I know I can't. If it's, you're in the middle and you're having 4 or 5 calves a day, or 5, 6, 7, 10 calves a day, and you got heifers that, you're worried about, you just you just don't leave. You just can't. I can't. I mean, it's every one you save is one that can maybe keep you out of the red that year,
Right.
so and you don't want to lose a cow and a calf because
Right.
you weren't there. So yeah, it's you're married to it. I mean, it's worse than, I don't know, nothing's worse than having a milk cow. I think a milk cow is because you're dealing with them twice a day and they're a pain. But you're lucky you haven't had to have a milk cow.
No.
We should buy you one for your birthday.
No. No.
Yeah,
Like,
no, it's
I
it's
wouldn't even know what to do
it's
with the milk. It'd be like, yeah, let's just
well, that's the problem, is that, at some point, if you got a really good milker, unless you got a really big family, you can go through a lot of milk pull through that cow and not be able to use it. You're making everything out of milk. All you're making pastries, and I mean, you're doing
yeah.
everything to use it up. So, which isn't a bad thing, but it's it's something that you really need to be able to use the resource.
Right. Especially for some
And
grown kids.
Eh, yeah, for growing kids, and you know what? And I just don't drink much milk anymore. And I used to go through, I easily went through probably 2.5, 3 gallons a week when I was growing up. I mean,
Well, I
milk,
mean, that was me growing up
constantly.
too. It was milk, yogurt, ice cream, and cheese. Those
Yeah.
were like the four, like those four things made up probably 75% of my diet, because I love ice cream. To this day, you give me a bowl of ice cream, I'm gonna devour it. Cheese,
Yeah.
I'm just like any other person. I love cheese. Milk, I used to just drink it just by the gallon. I think mom would get like 2 gallons a week, and Braden and I would just destroy that.
Oh,
And
you guys,
then
yeah, we went through about 4 gallons a week. I mean, it just,
yeah,
yeah.
and then
No, we were
yogurt. I mean,
constantly
I
buying
love
milk.
yogurt too, but I don't know. I just got to the point
But
where I don't really
yo,
have dairy in my yogurt or in my diet much.
yeah. Well, and that's me. I love milk. God, I love the taste of it, and I love cheese, and I love milk products. But I have noticed that when I drink milk, I just get really stuffed up, and so,
Oh,
and I can't get this thing in my throat. Just this phlegmy thing, and I can't get rid of it. It's like, it's
see, and
not
I'm
worth it.
I'm fortunate. I don't have that issue, but I just don't. Once I started getting more into paying attention to my diet and not becoming one of those people that gained 50 pounds overnight after getting out of high school, like
Right?
stuff like that. Like that's a big
Beer
part
has a
of it.
lot to do with that.
Beer does, but I take that sacrifice on a regular basis.
Yeah. Well,
But
I
I
mean,
don't.
hey, somebody's got
I
to.
I don't with the dairy though. Like it's just one of those things. I just kind of outgrew it. I
Yeah.
think also part of that was wrestling, because wrestling you couldn't have any dairy, and I just
Right.
slowly, like, it just kind of fell off.
You just
By
kind of weaned yourself off. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and babies have, of all species, have, that are mammals anyway. They got a little something that they can break down lactose a whole lot
yep,
easier. So,
yep,
and as you age, you get to be, not baby age anymore. Those early teen, late, 9, 10, 11 years old, you start to not produce that enzyme to break the milk down as much in your stomach, and So milks are for babies, and that's okay. But they're still good to have in things like cinnamon rolls and bread
Ice
and
cream.
things like that.
God,
You know,
yeah,
so
give me some ice cream.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, no, we're kind of off the topic a little bit about cleanup, but I mean it all applies about when you can and different times of the year when you have different activities that allow it, and or it's better for it. There's no sense in just sitting here looking out the window waiting for a cow to calve. You might as well do something, and that's where working these horses comes in, and um, cleaning the shop. I meant to do that, and I still haven't gotten to that. We're working on an old pickup in there that we're doing some more work on, and I'm building a table laminating out of 2x4s. That was a very cold weather type activity
Yeah.
in the shop. So yeah, you're always doing stuff like that in the wintertime. Is a really good time to do that because when it's really cold, when you're done, when you're feeding and you're watching, there isn't a lot else that you really can do outside except make sure water's open, cows are fed, horses are fed, everybody's okay, and then it's in working on some things that are needed, like repairs on tractors, repairs on vehicles, little projects you want to do, building gates or building stuff, fabricating stuff inside the shop. So that's just what we do.
As I say, it's also the same concept of during the summertime when it gets super rainy and you just
Yeah.
can't do anything. You just kind of find stuff in the house or in the shop or in the
Right.
barn to, oh, it's we gotta tidy these things up, we gotta clean these things up, we gotta dust stuff off, we gotta make sure it's all in order. Just use it as an excuse to kind of do housekeeping in a sense.
Well, and I can remember when my grandpa, we had the North Place, and I was out there with him, and I was probably, at that time I was probably around 14, something like
Hmm.
that, and I can remember it well. It was haying season. We had all the equipment picked up, greased. I mean, it was serviced, and we had been haying, and all of a sudden, and it was late June, mid to late June, and it started raining, and it rained for like 2 weeks solid, and we couldn't get in the fields, we couldn't do anything else, and we were really caught up on everything we could do. We dinked around in the shop, but trying to just keep busy. The next thing you know, we're taking naps like twice a day. you know Certainly after lunch, because grandpa always had laid down for 20-30 minutes after we ate a meal in the afternoon. And I'll tell you what, if you do that, he'd lay down, so nothing else for me to do, so I'd lay down on the floor, and they had a brand new saddle blanket for me, or there, and I grabbed that heavy thick wool saddle blanket, and I just pull it over my lay on the floor and pull it over my head, and nice and dark, and I'd crap out and go to sleep. And 20 minutes later, he'd get up, go in, sit and have a cup of coffee, and then we go back to work. And the hardest part of that is when you go back to school in the fall, because you eat
Oh
and
yeah.
your body wants to take a
Oh yeah.
nap, and you're like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. God, you had the hardest time keeping your eyes open. But yeah, there was nothing else to do. We're caught up. So it was unbelievable. We were just kind of hanging around looking at each other like, we hate to cuss the rain, but good God, is this ever going to let up? And I mean, it was raining for 2 weeks, rained. I think it was 1975. God, it was amazing how much grass we had that year, but that hay that we had down wasn't doing too good for us either.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say the other thing too is how long before you could start cutting the hay again? Because you had to
We
wait
had to
for
let
it to
it
kind of
dry
dry
out.
up, right?
Right. So you couple, if you had some good, depends on the weather. If it's really humid, it's going to take a while for that stuff to dry out, and it might take 3 days, couple 2-3 days for it's able to be dried. But what you had to do is, if it wouldn't dry, then you turn it with a hay rake,
Yeah.
roll it so that you're exposing the bottom side of it and getting all the water off of it, and then doing it. And it makes for crappy hay. It's leached out. It's not, you know,
Probably some of the stuff you feed off first.
yeah, you feed it off first, or feed that to stuff like, you feed it to steers, or, some of your open heifers, your non-bred stuff. You certainly wouldn't feed it to horses, but you could also grind it. If we had some hogs then, and we had a mixer grinder that you would feed, grain into it, and then you would also put alfalfa in
Uh,
it to mix in and grind it in that, and it would be okay for that. Those hogs will eat that just fine. So, um, yeah, that was but still, you don't want any of that because what we didn't use, we sold, and you
Right.
can't sell crappy hay like that,
Yeah.
or shouldn't. Some
Well,
people
that
do.
that kind of wraps up everything I had for spring cleaning. I think the big takeaway is you kind of use calving as an excuse to try and get ahead. And then like the point that we just made too is, in the summertime when a lot of the work gets done, you kind of use the poorer weather that forces you inside. Just you take advantage of it. It's all about efficiency, really. I mean, wintertime as well,
Right.
when you're stuck inside and you can't do much, you find stuff to do so that you're still trying to do something that's useful that will be helpful when the weather turns towards you, being more advantageous to get stuff done outside.
Well, and this last weekend, your mom come up and brought me some food. Her and Braden, and we tagged some cows and did some work, some of that cleanup work around here, all three of us, and worked on his pickup a little bit. But then she was very, very aggressive. You got to know this. She came up here with a gallon of paint, and that is uncalled for.
Oh, geez.
I know. So she asked me for a stiff bristled brush or something she could scrape the little boiler house where we have the heater out for the house. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty busy, but here it is. And she scraped that building, and the next thing you know, she's painting it. And I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. I got to stay busy because, God, I hate to paint.
We all hate painting.
I hate to paint. She loves painting. She loves to do it, I think.
Know.
And so then we kind of got your brother's pickup put together, and so she got to go for a ride, and I kind of got hoodwinked into it. So she says, hey, will you just kind of watch my stir that paint once in a while? Because she knew better than to ask me to paint. And she said, would you stir that paint so it doesn't get kind of a scum on the top of it, start drying out? I'm like, okay. Well, I looked at what she was doing, and she was up on a stool because 5'3" mother of yours is like trying to get to the eve of this thing. And I'm like, crap. All right, I might as well help her out, get this tall stuff. So they're gone. I'm sure they were gone like 4 or 5 hours at least on this.
Yeah, of course. Well, they probably went to the bar.
Yeah, I was like probably 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but it's like, oh my God. So I painted the top of this stupid thing. I went, she's smarter than you got to give her credit for it. She hooks me into this stuff once in a while, but coming at me aggressively with a paintbrush, that is bad. That's a bad thing.
Yeah.
All right. You think we're all finished up on this then?
Yeah, that's all I got.
About as far as we can manage this, but yeah, this is always a mission of scatter stuff out and then put it back together and dump it in a spot and figure out what you want to keep and what you want to get rid of, and it never ends. It just never ends. So
yeah,
I guess with that, we'll thank everybody till you're better paid.